President Obama returns to Washington and to a divided Congress, but instead of working with congressional lawmakers to, heal political rifts that certainly are evident in D.C. and get important legislation passed, his agenda. Instead, he's hitting the road for a two-day bus tour promoting his agenda.
All right, so reaching across the aisle is that passé. Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker here to weigh in. Governor, are you surprised the president is going to go on the bus tour campaign like?
Well, unfortunately, I'm not surprised, considering where this president's been in the past. But we want to get something done. I mean, we've got a pretty big budget showdown looming here.
Huge.
We've got, obviously, major problems in the Middle East and in Egypt. These are the times when you need to sit down. If you're a chief executive, you should sit down with your legislative body. Even the last couple of years when we had big battles in Wisconsin, every Wednesday morning, the legislature's in session. I meet early in the morning with the legislative leadership, and then I meet all morning with lawmakers in both political parties, because that's how you figure out how to get things done. And despite all the hype of big things we did with unions last session, I think 96% of the bills I signed the law were passed by Republicans and Democrats, and that's what you got to do. You got to meet with them.
You do have to do that, but don't you think the president really has his eye not on his agenda for right now, but really on the midterms already?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's talk, even when I was at the White House back in February, I could sense the feeling was that they were hoping they could take the sequester and put that burden on the House and somehow flip things. The last few months since then, if anything, it's gone the opposite direction.
Yeah, that sequester was the end of the world, wasn't it?
Well, and ironically, the flip now is after Max Baucus's announcement about not running and calling Obamacare a train wreck, now they're worried about losing the Senate. So more than anything, I think he's out there trying to do enough to hold the Senate in the midterm election.
Right. So what kind of a disservice is this to the American people then? I mean, the approval ratings for both the president and Congress have been plummeting lately.
Well, and the biggest, obviously for years, Washington, Congress, the folks in our nation's capital always have low ratings because really they don't get things done. I mean, that's the contrast with state houses versus our nation's capital. But it's events like this where you have an opportunity. You could bring people in early instead of waiting till days before the shutdown's looming out there. And unfortunately, that's what people cynically expect out of Washington. It's about time somebody says, no, we need to have a different approach. And the president, whether I voted for him or not, and obviously I didn't, the president's still the leader of this country, and he's the one that needs to step up and provide that leadership.
So the RNC has a series of meetings up in Boston, and they went at it, and they made it public that they disagree on certain things, especially Governor Christie and Rand Paul continue to snipe at each other. Rand Paul indicating they're a big party, they can have a libertarian bent, and Chris Christie says, no, we are not a debating society. We are a political operation that needs to win. What philosophy best suits you, Governor Walker, and what's best for the party?
Well, I think great policy is good politics. I put policy first. I think people are hungry for leadership. I think they want people to step up. I think that's why, even though the president got reelected by a significant margin, particularly in key swing states, almost every one of those swing states we talked about last year is now today governed by a Republican governor. And so they're
You could say Republican governors and stabilize the economy to allow the president to win.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. You look in Wisconsin and Illinois, in Michigan and Ohio and Florida. I mean, think about all Florida. Rick Scott came in and the unemployment rate's almost, 4.5, 5 points lower than when he first took office. The economic turnaround in those key swing states happened more because of Republican leadership in the states than what's happening in Washington.
It sounds like you see the possibility for growth, as does Senator Rand Paul. Here he is on Fox News Sunday talking about how you bring some of the libertarians in. That's good for the Republicans. Watch.
It's big enough for both of us. It's big enough for a lot of different Republicans. And in fact, we don't need to. This all started with him saying, oh, we don't have room for libertarian Republicans. The thing is that's how we grow our party.
You're not going to run.
Good point.
Right. You're not going to announce if you're running or not yet. You think it's way too early. You think it's too early for them and Hillary Clinton and anybody else to be saying
Well,
this?
at least on the Republican side, I think it's too early. I think it's a disservice both to the party and to the country, because we've got 36 races for governor next year. 22 of them, including me, are Republican governors. You've got a U.S. Senate where we've got a very real chance to get a majority. You keep the House, which has been doing a good job. You get the Senate back. Then whomever the nominee is in 2016 has a real opportunity, he or she, on the Republican side, can ultimately come in and say, we can turn America around just like these Republican governors and Republican legislative leaders have done across the country.
But
it's too early to talk.
Roll around earlier and earlier every year, doesn't it?
Got to focus on 2014.
Yeah.
Let me focus on this. Whose desk did you get the stapler off? This, because it looks like Cavuto's.
I worked my way through after seeing that segment out there. I'm with you, though. I go crazy over the electronic stuff. My printer gets jammed, the computer goes. But that's a new one. I'm going to look around and check to make sure there's staples and all those.
You would be, anytime you fill up a staple, you're helping Brian kill me. Wherever you work.
Anywhere in America. Who knows where you may show up next.
All right, Governor.
Thanks, Governor.
Good to see you.
Always great to see you.
All right.